next month will be the sesquicentenary of Churchill's birth.
Good
Thank
job
you.
on that word, yeah.
Thanks. So we will be taking a look at his life as shown in postage stamps. To do that, we will have our resident philatelist, Dick Easom, here in the studio to go over stamps and teach me new words.
Thanks, Tonya. I have been teasing Tonya all morning with long words like sesquicentenary.
Sesquicentenary.
There you go.
Yeah,
150th. There we go. Awesome. Hey, everyone. It's time for another stamp talk. I'm going to use some examples from my personal collection of global stamps that were issued after Churchill's death, which is this big blue binder here, to show you some aspects of his life that may be familiar and some that you probably didn't know about. You may also learn some facts about the countries whose stamps we're going to highlight. So let's see the stamps. Okay, so Churchill, Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, was born on the 30th of November 1874 of mixed English and American parentage at his family's ancestral home, Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire. On his father's side, he was a member of the aristocracy as a descendant of John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, representing the Conservative Party, had been elected Member of Parliament, an MP, for Woodstock in 1874. His mother, Jenny, was a daughter of Leonard Jerome, an American businessman. He became a statesman, military officer, and writer, twice Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, first from 1940 to 1945 during the Second World War, and again from 1951 to 1955. He died on the 24th of January 1965, and I remember watching the state funeral on our small black and white TV on the following Saturday, 30th of January. The following year, 1966, on the first anniversary of his death, 33 countries in the British Commonwealth each issued sets of 4 stamps. And I always wanted to collect all those sets, but at the time I couldn't really afford it, and I didn't have the means to acquire them anyway. And about literally just over 2 years ago, I finally got around to it, and I collected all of those stamps, and a lot more from all over the world.
So Dick, your interest in stamps goes back decades then.
Yeah, I think I first started collecting stamps when I was 10 or 11.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a long time ago. I don't want to admit how long ago that was. But if you remember, I saw Churchill's funeral in 1965, so that kind of makes me old. Okay. So, 1882, Churchill is 7 years old, and he began boarding at St. George's School in Ascot in Berkshire. He hated it. He didn't do well academically, regularly misbehaved. In September 1884, because of poor health, he was moved to another school, Brunswick School in Hove, which is on the south coast of England. There, his academic performance improved, but he continued to misbehave. He narrowly passed the entrance exam for the Harrow School, but he did get in, and he became a pupil there in April of 1888. He was not academically brilliant, except in English and history, and his teachers complained he was unpunctual and careless. But he did write poetry and letters, and these were published in the school magazine, the Harrovian, and he won a fencing competition. His father insisted that he be prepared for a career in the military, so Churchill's last 3 years at Harrow were spent in the army's classes. But he performed pretty poorly in most of his exams. So let's take a look at the stamps. A little bit of history. In 1963, Britain ceded responsibility for the Trucial States postal systems, that's now the United Arab Emirates, to the rulers of those states. An American philatelic entrepreneur called Finbar Kenny, who was quite a character in the stamp collecting world, saw the opportunity to create several editions of stamps aimed at the lucrative collector's market. And in 1964, he concluded a deal with the cash-strapped emirate of Ajman to produce stamps for the government. He made something of a specialty out of signing these deals, and he'd also signed with the ruler of Fujairah in 1964. And he actually got involved in a bribery case in the US over his dealings with the government of the Cook Islands in the South Pacific. Like I said, quite a character. So these stamps were very often luridly illustrated, for what were basically Muslim countries, and irrelevant to many of the actual emirates they came from. They're known collectively as dunes, and they're mostly worthless today, but they actually make interesting collector's items. and we'll be featuring quite a few of these in this set. So the stamp on the left, the first one, is from the Emirate of Fujairah. That's a dune. It has a value of 10 naya paisa, where 100 naya paisa made 1 Gulf rupee. Now, the Gulf rupee was an Indian currency used in the Arabian Peninsula and Persian Gulf countries from 1959 until 1966, so about the time that these stamps actually came out. The other 2 stamps were issued to commemorate Churchill's birth centenary in 1974, the 2 on the right. Actually, I'm still in the process of completing this. I'm probably about 80% of all of the stamps that were issued for that commemoration, so maybe one day I'll come back and show you those. But there's a few I scanned here just to add a bit of colour. So, fun fact number 1, the Antigua stamp on the right-hand side has been overprinted for use on its sister island, Barbuda. You can see the little Barbuda overprint there as an enlargement. These overprints were aimed at stamp collecting market because, guess what, Barbuda only has 1 town and the population is only just over 1,500 people. They actually issued stamps for another island in that group called Redonda, which is kind of bizarre because nobody lives on Redonda. It's completely uninhabited, but I digress. Fun fact number 2, since independence from the United Kingdom in 1965, the Gambia, which is the middle stamp, always takes the definite article on its stamps, since the Gambia was its official name after independence. All of the stamps here are based on the same photograph of Churchill at Harrow, which was one of the 2 probably top prestigious schools in England, the other of course being Eton, which you might have heard of.
I really like this picture. We got to bring top hats back.
Well, they actually wore top hats right through the end of World War II. They actually had to have a top hat, and now they actually wear straw boaters. There you go. So let's move along. After 2 unsuccessful attempts to gain admittance to the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, which is the UK's West Point, Churchill finally got in. He was accepted as a cadet in the cavalry starting in September 1893. In February of 1895, he was commissioned as a cornet, which is a 2nd lieutenant, in the 4th Queen's Own Hussars Regiment of the British Army, based at Aldershot. Eager to witness military action, he used his mother's influence, his mother was American, to get posted to a war zone. In the autumn, he went to observe the Cuban War of Independence and became involved in skirmishes after joining Spanish troops attempting to suppress independence fighters. With the Hussars, he went to Bombay in October of 1896. Based in Bangalore, he was in India for 19 months, visiting Calcutta and joining expeditions to Hyderabad and the northwest frontier.
Dick, what's a hussar?
Hussar is a type of cavalry regiment. Type of cavalry, yes. It's hussars and lancers and all different types, but yeah.
Nice.
Nowadays they just drive around in tanks. Pretty much. They don't ride horses and carry swords, but only for official reasons. So
yeah.
Okay, ceremonial reasons. That's the word I was trying to think of. Okay, so let's have a look at our stamps. Here's our 3 stamps now. Here's one from the Emirate of Fujairah on the left. Now, we talked about our Gulf rupee, and so that was only in force until 66. Here we are, 21st of March, 1966. The Trucial States had a new currency, the Qatar Dubai Rial, which was divided into 100 dirhams. So each emirate then overprinted many of the older stamps with the new currency so they could keep using them. And it replaced the Gulf rupee at par. So on this stamp on the left, it's a little hard to see, but the words naya paisa in English and Arabic have been struck through, and the word dirham just been printed on top. So that's how they reused them.
Reusing it, no waste.
No waste, indeed. You just run them through again and overprint them. Okay, on the right-hand side, the red stamp from Nicaragua. Churchill was respected all over the world, and many countries had a lot of high respect for him. So they used the same photograph as the basis for their stamp, as you can see. The one in the middle is from the country of Upper Volta, and that shows Churchill's service in India, and it's actually based on the photograph of Churchill in Bangalore with a completely different background of people fighting, which is probably, I guess, some artistic license. Originally, that picture, which I managed to find, the background is actually a giant hedge, so they replaced that with fighting. There we go. Now, Upper Volta actually changed its name to Burkina Faso in 1984, but it actually still uses this currency called the West African CFA franc. So the CFA franc, which is the franc of the Financial Community of Africa, it's common to actually many of these former French colonies, of which Upper Volta was. And it's the name of actually two currencies. There's the West African CFA franc, that's used in 8 countries, and the Central African CFA franc, which is used in 6. So the legacy of the French colony continues in the name of the currency. So, moving along. So, anticipating the outbreak of the Second Boer War between Britain and the Boer republics, Churchill sailed to South Africa in 1899 as a journalist for the Morning Post. In October, he travelled to the conflict zone near Ladysmith, then besieged by Boer troops. At the Battle of Chively, his train was derailed by Boer artillery shelling. He was captured as a prisoner of war, or POW, and put in a POW camp in Pretoria. But in December, Churchill escaped and evaded his captors by stowing aboard freight trains and hiding in a mine. He made it to safety in Portuguese East Africa, which we now know as Mozambique, and his escape attracted much publicity and is actually shown here on the stamp from Barbuda in the middle.
I'm really into
of those
this
three.
hat.
Huh?
This hat that he's wearing, I'm into it.
Oh, the hat's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they call those slope hats in Australia, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway,
I'll Google it.
Yes, everybody Google that. So the Fujairah stamp on the left shows he's actually a moustache. You can see there's a very pathetic little moustache there on the top lip. But the UK stamp, which is from the 1974 Birth Centenary collection, does not, which is kind of odd. So I looked this up, and did Churchill ever actually have a moustache? Well, he did, apparently. He tried to grow one, because the British Army regulation of the time stated no shaving of the upper lip. So if you grew a moustache, you grew a moustache. If you couldn't, it was kind of looking sad, which is what the case we've got here. That actually didn't change until the First World War when it became, the rule was clean shaven. So there we are. As an anecdote, Churchill, of course, there's lots of anecdotes surrounding Churchill. This is one of them. So in 1900, he was actually elected as a Conservative Member of Parliament. A young woman came up to him and said, Mr. Churchill, there are 2 things I don't like about you, your new moustache and your new political party. And Churchill responded, pray do not disturb yourself, madam. You are not likely to come into contact with either.
Oh.
Yes.
Sad.
Exactly. The other thing I want to point out here on this slide is that, for countries that use stamps as a source of revenue, i.e. not just for postage, such as the dunes I mentioned earlier, the issuing of imperforate varieties is also a lure to collectors. As you can see on the Fujairah stamp, it has no perforation. They're literally cut by a machine or cut by hand, as early stamps were before they figured out perforation.
Are these kinds of stamps very common?
They are for the countries that do that kind of thing, yes. Believe it or not, there's a lot of the sub-Saharan former European colonies issued imperforates, 1970s, mid-1980s. Even France issued some imperforates, or shall we say some imperforates are available.
Cool, I don't think I've ever seen
and some still do it today, just for collectors, just to annoy us. So we have to now buy 2 sets of stamps.
Gotta make that money.
Absolutely. So here's one you probably don't know about. The Master, Wardens and Assistants of the Guild, Fraternity or Brotherhood of the Most Glorious and Undivided Trinity and of St Clement in the parish of Deptford Strond in the county of Kent. That is the full name, believe it or not, of Trinity House, which is the official authority for lighthouses in England, Wales, Channel Islands and Gibraltar. Trinity House is also responsible for the provision and maintenance of other navigational aids such as lightships, buoys, maritime radio and satellite communication systems. The Corporation of Trinity House of Deptford Strond was established in 1514 by a royal charter granted by King Henry VIII. Now, Winston Churchill gained his status as an elder brother of Trinity House as a result of his position as First Lord of the Admiralty before and during the First World War. Churchill was seen in this Trinity House cap, as we can see on one of the stamps there, or all the stamps there, on many naval-related forays during the Second World War. So here he is wearing this Trinity House cap on stamps from Lundy, Haiti, and the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah. Now, Lundy, for those of you that don't know, is a little island in the Bristol Channel in the southwest of England. It was actually first mentioned in 1189, and its current incarnation, it's now run as a trust. It derives all its income from tourism, and it issues these special stamps, which have the currency of puffins, which I think is kind of cute, mainly because there's a lot of puffin birds on the island. And they're actually used for carriage of the mail from the island to the mainland, because there's no Royal Mail post office on the island. And they actually originally had to be put on the back of envelopes, and then on the top left of envelopes, and then the Royal Mail finally said, nah, that's okay. You can put them on the top right-hand corner where we normally put a stamp.
That's cute.
But yes, they're kind of cool. So the Ras Al Khaimah stamp on the right-hand side is actually based on a photograph of Churchill in his Trinity House uniform with President Roosevelt. And they are on the deck of the HMS Prince of Wales on the 10th of August 1941 during the Atlantic Conference, which set out the post-war goals of the US and the UK in the so-called Atlantic Charter. And this actually led directly to the foundation of the modern United Nations in 1945. So Ras Al Khaimah is part of the UAE and issued many of these dunes stamps from 66 to 72. And in the middle stamp, I suspect the inspiration for this stamp from Haiti is also the Atlantic Conference, since the HMS Prince of Wales was a King George V class battleship. And you can see the guns behind his head there. She was virtually brand new at the time of the conference, having only been commissioned in January of that year, 1941, but was sadly sunk by Japanese aircraft in December that year in the South China Sea, where she still lies, unfortunately.
Neat that it's a little diamond shape instead of the regular rectangle.
Yes, and they're a pain in the neck to lay out on the page, believe it or not. But it's kind of fun. So there we are. Okay.
Ooh.
So, having lost the Battle of Britain and therefore daylight air superiority over Britain, Nazi Germany began a bombing campaign known as the Blitz for just over 8 months during the Second World War. Over 40,000 civilians were killed and over 125,000 injured in just over 8 months. Over 2 million houses were damaged or destroyed, the majority of which were in London. Eventually, the German High Command realised the campaign had failed to demoralise the British or damage war production. So these stamps are part of this 33-country set that I mentioned earlier. These were designed by notable British stamp designer Jennifer Toombs, issued in sets of 4 on the 24th of January 1966 to commemorate the first anniversary of Churchill's death. So the background design of these, as you can see, is based on an iconic picture of St Paul's Cathedral in London, taken in December 1940 during a firestorm. As a major landmark, St Paul's was targeted by the Luftwaffe, and Churchill issued a rallying cry to Londoners stating, "At all costs, St Paul's must be saved." And around 200 volunteers stepped up to form St Paul's Watch, carrying out a 24/7 fire watch on the building, sometimes during intense bombing campaigns. They used sandbags and water pumps, and the cathedral was hit by 2 bombs, but its survival became a symbol of national defiance. Note that none of the 4 countries, you were going to say?
Yeah, I like those colors.
Aren't they cute?
They
yeah.
look
So
like our icon.
yeah, right. That is just part of the stamp life cycle. There you go.
Yeah.
No, each of the 33 countries issued these stamps in the same colours, but obviously with different country names and other attachments. And funnily enough, none of the 4 countries on these stamps actually exist as such.
Oh.
So Basuto land actually became the Kingdom of Lesotho in October 1966, not long after this stamp was issued. And fun fact, Lesotho is only one of 3 enclaved sovereign states, which is a country that's completely surrounded by another country. No coastline, it's landlocked, right? Yeah. So it's completely surrounded by another country.
Right.
And it's within the Republic of South Africa.
That's really cool. Pop quiz, does anyone know the other 2 enclaves? And if you do, put your answers in the chat.
Awesome. Let's see what people can think up of here.
Yeah.
So Bechuana land, which is the one at the top right, that one became the Republic of Botswana in September of '66, again not long after this. The Federation of South Arabia became part of what is now Yemen in November of 67, and the New Hebrides Condominium, which was actually islands in the South Pacific, jointly governed by England and France, became the Republic of Vanuatu in July of 1980. And they actually issued most of their stamps in two versions, in both English and French. So this is the French version you can see here, and if you look at it carefully, on the right-hand side you can see it says République Française, RF, at the top, and then the Queen Elizabeth cipher, E2R, underneath. On the British ones, they would be reversed, so E2R would be at the top, and RF underneath, and obviously it would be in English. And sort of because of the trouble of trying to jointly govern by both French and English, the popular name of this was the New Hebrides Pandemonium because of the chaos. All right, another one you probably haven't heard of, Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports. What's that all about?
God, these hats.
Yeah, so this is actually something I found from the London Gazette from the 28th of October 1941. For those of you that don't know, the London Gazette is where all official government appointments in the UK are actually published. And most of it's online, which is kind of fascinating. So this is from the London Gazette. I quote, "The King has been pleased by letters patent under the Great Seal of the Realm, bearing date the 15th instant, in other words, the 15th of October, to grant unto the Right Honourable Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill the office of Constable of His Majesty's Castle of Dover, and also the office of Warden and the Keeper of His Majesty's Cinque Ports, and their members, together with the office of Admiralty within the said Cinque Ports and their members, ... There's more. But basically, who are the Cinque Ports? What were the Cinque Ports? So the Cinque Ports, obviously, if you know your French, Cinque is the anglicised version of cinq, meaning five, and there were 5 ports on the southeast coast of England: Hastings, New Romney, Hythe, Dover and Sandwich. And what they did was they provided ships to the monarch in return for certain privileges. And this actually dates back to Anglo-Saxon times, before the Norman conquest, to the time of King Edward the Confessor. So this is actually from the early 11th century. This played an important role in the development of the Royal Navy eventually. Adding more towns, the Confederation reached its peak in the Middle Ages with over 40 members, in other words 40 little ports. But now it's just a ceremonial thing. Some of these ports, because of the way the rivers are silted up, are actually so far away from the sea they can't be used as ports anymore, but there you are. Okay. His ceremonial role for Churchill, granted by King George VI, the Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports, dates from at least the 12th century, when the title was Keeper of the Coast. So we've got 3 stamps issued by Liberia. This is the 20-cent stamp of the 3. This shows Churchill in his ceremonial uniform, very fancy bicorn hat and all the medals and things. And then on the right-hand side is a stamp from Khor Khan, issued with, along with other scenes. So in this scene we have the Blitz, as we can see the red and orangey bit there. And on the right-hand side we can see Churchill with his Lord Warden hat. This is another Dune stamp. Khor Khan is a very tiny enclave of the Emirate of Sharjah on the east coast of the United Arab Emirates, and it's geographically surrounded by the Emirate of Fujairah. It's not a complete enclave because obviously it has a coastline. So that is not one of the answers, if you're thinking. That is not one of the answers. No trick questions here. This one's actually printed with silver ink, which was a devil to scan. So I found one that had the best image, because a lot of them come out very dark.
You'll have to show it to me in real life later.
I will do, indeed. Okay, now we know from Sarah and from our previous 2 art talks, Churchill was a passionate painter. And Sarah said he was introduced to painting by his sister-in-law, Lady Gwendolyn Churchill, actually during a holiday in 1915. And he was pretty depressed after being blamed for the failure of Gallipoli in First World War. And he became captivated by painting, and I think it's totaled over like 500 watercolors and then eventually oils until his death. And as Sarah mentioned, we covered his paintings in Art Talk 27, which was back in November 2020. Gosh, we've been doing this for a long time. And Art Talk 137 back in 2023. So these are all Dune stamps. I apologize for putting up so many Dunes, but they do actually cover some nice aspects of his life, and it's not just a picture of Churchill, which is what you get in a lot of the others.
Well, these are pretty.
Pretty is a good word.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's a word to describe,
Yes.
the dunes.
So here's Churchill painting. The one on the left stamp is issued by the Emirate of Fujairah. And he is painting in Camara de Lobos on Madeira Island in 1950. And I can actually say my wife and I have been there to that actual place. And there's a big thing on the wall that says this is where Churchill painted. So that's kind of cool. A little anecdote here, another Churchill anecdote. So as we remember our history, Napoleon Bonaparte was sent into exile on the island of St. Helena, and he was given a barrel of Madeira wine, which is a fortified wine, which is lovely actually. And he didn't want to drown his sorrow, so he didn't actually drink it. So the barrel actually came back to Madeira and was then bottled as the special 1792. So it's very old Madeira. And Churchill actually had a bottle of this when he was on Madeira and summarised it very nicely, quoting, "Madeira wine is like drinking liquid history," which I think is lovely.
Beautiful.
The middle stamp here, our diamond stamp, is from the Emirate of Mark Twain. And this shows him painting en plein air, as the French would say, in the fresh air, in Marrakesh in Morocco. And lastly, the right-hand stamp from Kathiri shows him painting at the Surf Club in Miami Beach in 1946. Now, for those of you that don't know, Kathiri was a sultanate in the Hadramaut region of what is now Yemen and Dhofar region of Oman, which is the southwest part of Oman. It had been part of the British Protectorate of South Arabia, along with Aden, until 1967, when the Sultan was overthrown, and it became part of South Yemen, which is now part of Yemen. Just as a note there, Churchill actually said, "Happy are the painters, for they shall not be lonely. Light and colour, peace and hope will keep them company to the end of their day." And one of the things that, along with his writing, painting was one of the things that Churchill used to avoid depression, which he did suffer from a lot, and that sort of haunted him. But so Churchill suffered a stroke on the 10th of January 1965 and died on the 24th of January, and like Duke of Wellington in 1852 and William Gladstone in 1898, both of whom had served more than one term as Prime Minister, Churchill was given a state funeral. His coffin lay in state in Westminster Hall for 3 days. If you remember when the Queen died, she also, her coffin was in Westminster Hall. The funeral ceremony was at St Paul's Cathedral on the 30th of January, and then afterwards his coffin was taken by boat along the River Thames to Waterloo train station, and from there by special train to the family plot at St Martin's Church in Blaydon, Oxfordshire. These 3 stamps all show Churchill's coffin laying in state. From left to right is the Emirate of Dubai, the middle is the Emirate of Mark Twain, and then on the right is the Maldives Islands. These are all issued to commemorate the first anniversary of his death. And then in the Dubai stamp, you can see there that he's wearing that uniform of the Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports. And then finally, we have to talk about the photograph. So this is Canadian photographer Yusuf Karsh, photographed Churchill on the 30th of December 1941 during his visit to the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa. Karsh had been invited by the Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King, but Churchill had not been informed he was going to be photographed. And at first he was very surprised and angry, I think, when he saw Karsh setting up the lights. He lit a fresh cigar, and of course, if you know anything about Churchill, he was always seen with a cigar in his mouth. But he finally relented to having Karsh take the photograph, but he wouldn't put the cigar down. So I'm going to let Karsh tell the story. I held out an ashtray, but he would not dispose of it. I went back to my camera and made sure that everything was all right technically. I waited. He continued to chomp vigorously at his cigar. I waited. Then I stepped towards him and, without premeditation, but ever so respectfully, I said, "Forgive me, sir," plucked the cigar out of his mouth and put it in the ashtray. By the time I got back to my camera, he looked so belligerent he could have devoured me. It was in that instant that I took the photograph.
This photo makes me really happy. It really encapsulates, you took my cigar, blah.
Exactly. Many countries use the stamps issued stamps to commemorate Churchill's death based on that iconic photograph, which we call the Angry Lion photograph. And these are issues from the UK, Canada, and the United States. Now, little fun fact here. Our last fun fact of the day. The US stamp was first issued in Fulton, Missouri, where Churchill had delivered his famous Iron Curtain speech in 1946. Now, many of you don't know this, but President Kennedy had made him the first person to be awarded an honorary US citizenship on April the 9th, 1963, by signing House Resolution 4374 into law. Now, for those of you smart Alex that know your history, and say, oh, no, the first one was actually Lafayette, it was not. He was actually made a real naturalized citizen. Churchill was the first honorary citizen. So there we go. There's a little bit of history about Churchill and his life and some stamps.
Thanks, Dick. That was great. I didn't realize how much you could learn from postage stamps.
Yeah, the little pieces of history, right? Little pieces of history, little pieces of art. So did we have any answers to our conclave? Conclave. I'm thinking of the new movie that's coming out. The enclave question earlier.
Yeah, we got several answers. Max Gloucester Van Loon is the one that got it right.
Yes.
He got San Marino and the Vatican, and Mark Kilbane did say San Marino. So, runner up.
Absolutely, yeah. So they are, both of those countries, of course, are surrounded by the Republic of Italy.
Liz also said Monaco. Why isn't Monaco?
So Monaco is a sort of enclave, but it has a coastline. So it is completely surrounded on its geographically by France.
Oh, okay.
Right, but it has a coastline, so it's not. It's a type of enclave, but we were talking about enclaved sovereign states, and that has a very specific meaning, which is countries that are completely surrounded, landlocked by another country. Technically. But
Awesome.
Max, great response, Max. Thank you. Well done.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our stamp talk for this week. We will see everyone next week for our Halloween town hall.
Hope you'll enjoy it, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.